Before we begin, a content warning. This episode discusses suicide, pregnancy, domestic violence, and gun violence. Some of the content may be upsetting, especially to those who have experienced abuse or loss. If you or someone you know needs support, please reach out. Help is available by dialing 988 for mental health and suicide crises, and at the National Domestic Violence Hotline, that's 1-800-799-7233. You can also text START, that's S-T-A-R-T, to 88788 for support. You're listening to The DeLo Show, and I am your host, Ryan DeLozier. And this is Season 1, The Murder of Linda Lee Madison. A teenage girl, a single gunshot wound to the head. Her boyfriend first admitting he killed her, then claiming she shot herself. A jury of 8 women and 4 men found him guilty of first-degree murder, but nearly 50 years later, the questions have not gone away. This season, we're going back to Yakima, Washington, 1975, to re-examine the case of 18-year-old Linda Lee Madison and 19-year-old Joseph William Brooks. We'll dig into trial testimony, court records, police reports, and newspaper archives, exploring what really happened and why the case still raises questions today. Today's episode. The morning of February 5th begins with the most basic yet tragic fact. Linda Lee Madison was found dead in her bed at the home of Arlene Martin, where she'd been staying while finishing high school. She had a gunshot wound to the right temple. The bullet had traveled nearly straight through and lodged in the left side of her head. Joseph Brooks, her ex-boyfriend, he was arrested the same day. He told his brother, his parents, and law enforcement that he had shot Linda. He wrote letters from jail saying that he had killed her and that the guilt was tearing him apart. Weeks later, he changed his story. He claimed Linda had shot herself using the very rifle he had brought into the room. The same rifle he admitted he had carried with the intent of killing her and then himself. The jury, they didn't buy it. But some still wonder, could it have been suicide? Or was it an act of premeditated violence disguised as something else? There were no powder burns on Linda's skin, something that typically is present in close-range gunshot suicides. When a gun is fired at very close range, unburned powder can leave stippling or burns around the entry wound. A firearms expert testified that the shot came from at least 12 inches away. That's not consistent with a self-inflicted wound, especially with a rifle. And then there's the weapon itself, a .22 caliber rifle measuring 26 inches from trigger to muzzle. The defense argued Linda could not have held the rifle and pulled the trigger. But the angle, the distance, and the physical limitations cast serious doubt. Brooks claimed he had placed a potato over the muzzle of the rifle to silence it, something he'd heard might work as a homemade silencer, and investigators did find evidence that seemed to support that, in part. There was potato substance splattered on the wall above Linda's body, but none in or around the gunshot wound itself. That detail mattered. A forensic expert testified that the test's potato residue could be found when the gun was fired at close range, which is about 6 inches. But at a distance of 12 inches or more, no residue appeared on the wound or the surface being tested. The implication? Linda was shot from more than a foot away. That finding does not align with the suicide theory, not unless she had unusually long arms or somehow managed to shoot herself from that distance. The potato wasn't the smoking gun, but it had raised more questions than it had answered. And then there's Linda's state of mind. She was pregnant. She had broken up with Brooks 2 weeks earlier, and according to testimony, she didn't want him to know she was expecting. She had been discussing her options with her best friend, Dottie Martin. There was no clear record of a confirmed appointment at Planned Parenthood, but she was making plans, including considering adoption or abortion. Multiple people testified that she had future plans, that she was not giving up, she was moving forward. And then there's what we now recognize as the warning signs of domestic violence. Linda had tried to cut off contact with Brooks. She had asked others to help him get away, and she told him not to come back to the house. Witnesses described him yelling profanities at her, throwing objects at the house, and refusing to accept that the relationship was over. Sadly, those are patterns we now associate with coercive control and escalating abuse. When a breakup occurs, that's often when victims are at the greatest risk. Was Linda afraid of Joseph Brooks? Did she try to create distance only to have him show up with a gun? Or did she take her own life with the very weapon he had brought into the room? Brooks said he changed his mind about killing her and left the rifle behind, but his first words to police were that he had done it, and that along with the physical evidence, that was enough for a jury to convict him of first-degree murder. On our next episode, we'll explore Joseph Brooks' statements, including the letters that he wrote from jail, and how his version of events shifted over time. We'll also look at what the crime scene may tell us and what it might have missed. This is The DeLo Show, Season 1, The Murder of Linda Lee Madison. Subscribe and share if you're ready to take this journey into one of Yakima's most haunting cases. If you or someone you know is in a crisis, help is available. For mental health or suicide support, call or text 988 anytime. For domestic violence help, call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-7233. You can also text START, S-T-A-R-T, to 88788. You are not alone, and you are not without options.